Thank you, Josh Allen. Thank you, Buffalo Bills. Finally, the Chiefs go down. And finally, the Chiefs will not be compared to the 07 Patriots. The Chiefs will not reach the heights of the 21 straight victories of the New England Patriots. Thank you to the best quarterback in the world. Yes, I said it. I told you Josh Allen is the number one quarterback. Y'all hated, but it's okay. Did Lamar Jackson beat the Chiefs? No. Josh Allen and the Bills beat the Chiefs. I know it's just the regular season, but that's the best win of the NFL season so far. Welcome to your NFL Week 11 reaction to all the games this Sunday. I'm here right after the Chiefs and the Bills. The Bills take it 30-21. I'm going to discuss the afternoon games, likely get to Sunday Night Football, watch that game, come back and review the rest of the week. 30-21 Buffalo Bills. Gronk, spike the like button if you like that. And Gronk, spike the like button if you enjoy these weekly reviews. Also, let me know in the comments your thoughts on all the games this week, whether it was your team, whether it was just a big game during the week that you thought was interesting, or a big takeaway that you have for the week. Who do you think's a contender? Who do you think's a pretender? Who are you buying into? What was an interesting storyline that you watched? Let's get to Bills 30, Chiefs 21 in Buffalo. Bills win. Bills cover. Bills are now 9-2. Chiefs are now 9-1, which means the Bills are just one game back of the Chiefs in the AFC for the number one seed in the AFC. We have never seen the Bills with the number one seed, but it looks like they will have a realistic chance to go on and win this conference in the regular season. The Chiefs still have a substantially easier schedule, but the Chiefs do still have to play the Broncos, which they barely beat last week. The Chargers in their own division again. They have to play the Texans, I believe, at some point. So they still have quite a few tough games. Meanwhile, Buffalo goes to their bye week, but they have quite a few tough games as well. They do take on the Niners right after their bye week. That should be a desperate game on Sunday Night Football for the Niners. And we'll talk about the 49ers as well today, who drop a game to Seattle in pretty dramatic fashion without George Kittle there. They play at LA. I think that's the Rams. That won't be an easy game against Stafford. And then they play at Detroit, which is probably like one of the biggest regular season games of the year because Detroit looks like the best team in football alongside the Bills, I would say. 30-21, Bills take it. And they were pretty much in the lead from the very beginning. They lost the lead at one point. I think 14-13 was the score, only because of a missed extra point by their kicker Bass on their opening touchdown by James Cook, which was their very first possession of the game. But beyond that, the Bills led at multiple points. They led, I believe, throughout the game, besides the 14-13. And they outscored the Chiefs in the fourth quarter, most importantly, 14-7. The game actually kind of slowed down and became a defensive battle during the third quarter. And there was multiple chances for both teams to take command and to take the lead and to take control of the game. But Buffalo ultimately was the team that made more big plays. They were the more explosive offense. I thought they were the more timely defense. And they deserved to win this game thoroughly. Let's just go through the stats quickly, and I'll give you my thoughts on the performances. 24 first downs for the Bills, 19 for the Chiefs. The Bills were even better than the Chiefs on third down. We know the Chiefs have been the best third down offense in football, but the Bills have actually been the best third down offense over the past 3 or 4 years with Josh Allen. 9 of 15 were the Bills on third down, which getting to that many third downs also allows for what, guys? Time of possession. That is typically the Chiefs' thing, but not in this game, right? Still 50% is very solid, but for Buffalo, 9 for 15, and then they were 1 for 2 on fourth down. Allen throws an interception on a fourth down that turned into a short field for the Chiefs to get some points, but early in the game, Mahomes also threw an interception, so both these quarterbacks had their bad plays in the game. I think Allen had more good plays, more plus plays, more superhuman plays than Pat Mahomes. Mahomes, I thought mostly like most of the offense for the Chiefs in this game was manufactured and schematic. And honestly, like in terms of drop back pass and in terms of giving up big plays down the field and in terms of just traditional like quick throws and stuff, like Mahomes and the Chiefs had very little of that in their offense. Like not even as much as you saw last year or nowhere near to what they did in the playoffs, where I thought like a lot of the success of Kansas City was in the middle of the field, deep down the field, play action, things like that. Mahomes actually had a really, really good game in that playoff game. This game was a lot of like end around screens, like runs, in the red zone, like a couple spot routes just over the middle to stop, and catch the ball. Like not a ton of, outside of maybe a few throws to DeAndre Hopkins. And there was, I think, one big throw early to Xavier Worthy on the first scoring drive of the Chiefs, I think. There weren't a ton of big throws from Mahomes in this game. And there were much more game-changing throws by Josh Allen. There was a number of them throughout the game. I think there was a couple to Curtis Samuel. There was a couple to Khalil Shakir in the middle of the field. There were a couple to Dawson Knox. There were a couple to Amari Cooper early in this game where Cooper had a great first half especially. But continuing with the statistics, the Bills outrushed the Chiefs, which is an area that I had concern for the Bills in this matchup, the ability to run the ball, but then also be able to outpace the Chiefs on the ground. 104 rushing yards for Buffalo to 78 for the Chiefs. But many of those, and the big difference there is Josh at the end of the game taking off for what could have been, or what maybe is the play of the year so far from a team, especially in a big spot. Josh Allen, 26-yard scramble on 4th and 2 to win the game and to put the game away, a 9-point lead with 2:27 left. And Allen takes off, he scores, he breaks tackles, he does his Josh Allen Superman thing, and he scores. So that was huge for Josh Allen and for the Bills. They also outpassed the Chiefs, 262 yards to 181 yards. They outgained the Chiefs by over 100 yards, 366 to 259. They had 2 more sacks. The Chiefs had 0 sacks in this game. The best eluder of sacks in football is Josh Allen. 0 sacks taken, not socks. I'm sure he wore socks. 2 sacks for the Bills. And again, interception at the end by Mahomes, which again, just like we'll talk about with Drake May, don't really care about those. That's just desperation heave at the end of the game. But, one interception early. 4 punts for the Chiefs, 3 punts for the Bills. Pretty much across the board. The Chiefs had more penalties, 6 penalties to 3. That can be contributed to the home field as well. More possession for the Bills, 34 to 25. There's absolutely no statistic or no area of the game where I would say the Chiefs beat the Bills. I think this was, despite it being a close competitive game, I think this was as thorough of a beating as the Chiefs have had in a couple of seasons, it feels like. This was an impressive performance all the way around. The Bills, I thought, limited mistakes offensively, defensively, special teams. They did miss an extra point, and they did throw an interception, so there were a couple of errors. But overall, nothing too substantial. Not a lot of pass interferences. Not a lot of unnecessary roughnesses, right? They kind of kept that out of the game. They made it so that the refs couldn't call those things. And I just think the Chiefs, they kind of showed their flaws, I think, mostly offensively, where they just can't generate a lot of explosive passes, right? Mahomes had 23 completions for under 200 yards. He ended up with 196 passing yards. He did have 3 touchdowns, right? All, I think, within the 10-yard line, if I'm not mistaken. But that's pretty crazy. Like, Allen only ends up with, I think, 1 touchdown throwing the ball and then 1 touchdown rushing the ball. And, people that just look at the box score will assume that Mahomes was just as good as Allen. But honestly, if you watch this game play to play, drive to drive, there was absolutely no question in anyone's mind who played better at the quarterback position. If you compare throw to throw, window to window, big throw to big throw, big down to big down, even mistake football, like Mahomes was just as mistake prone as Allen, if not more. He probably deserved to throw more. And I would argue that Allen was playing the better defense, and Allen didn't have his tight end in Dalton Kincaid. Allen didn't have one of his targets, Coleman, as well. So for the Bills to be able to win this game against the Chiefs, a team that it usually has the upper hand on everybody, but it kind of has this thing in the back of the mind of the Bills where the Bills have beat them in the regular season now 4 straight times. We've got to give them a lot of credit, Sean McDermott, Josh Allen, the entire team, for beating them in the regular season 4 straight times. But the Chiefs have beat them in the postseason 3 times. And coming off that loss in the divisional round where Bass missed that field goal to go to overtime, potentially to go to overtime, Chiefs could have drove down and scored as well at the end of the game, probably would have. But just saying, to get that erased from your mind and be able to respond in a spot like this and to be able to beat the Chiefs as impressively as I felt like they did, I think that speaks volumes, in my opinion. I think this is the best Bills team we've ever seen in this era. I'm not comparing them to the Jim Kelly era of teams, but I've been saying this for weeks. I think this is the most balanced, most gritty, toughest, most mentally strong Bills team we've ever seen. And I think they're the most versatile Bills team we've ever seen. I think they can win by running the ball. They can win by throwing the ball. They can win by manufacturing offense through the screen game, through, different sort of swing passes, things like that. They have a good blend of high-octane explosives and also manufactured offense. I think defensively, they play very smart. They play very fundamentally sound. They tackle very well. They cover very well. They seem to, especially from a pass defense standpoint, they have to be in the top 5 in football. The way that they cover, the way that they combine that with a rush. And then also on top of that, I feel like their run defense has been tested throughout the year. They've been solid against the run. They give up some explosives at times, but in this game, they really didn't. And the Chiefs weren't able to expose that. Kareem Hunt did have 60 yards in this game. I think a majority of the yards actually came in the fourth quarter when the Chiefs were trailing and trying to get back in the game. So there's that as well. So during the main course of the game, when running is more an important aspect, it felt like Kareem Hunt was a little bit less reliable in that regard, and the Chiefs' running game was a little bit less reliable. And Mahomes also didn't run for too many big gains either, which is also huge. So, going through the performances, I thought that, first of all, the big addition to the team, I thought Amari Cooper was big in the beginning of this game. A couple times when the Chiefs went to man coverage down the field, Amari Cooper separated. He had a nice double move down the field where Allen was able to hit him for a big play. He had a big fade on the first series to get that opening touchdown drive kick-started. A fade down the left sideline where he caught it with one hand, a perfect pass by Josh Allen, but a great catch as well. I'm just trying to find the stats here. Just getting a little bit deeper into the stats. And I thought from a receiving perspective, Khalil Shakir was everything we expected in this game. I said I think he would have a big game, and I think this is one of the spots where the Chiefs, the loss of L'Jarius Sneed and the inability to truly replace him as a man coverage corner showed up in this game, because the Bills played a lot, or the Chiefs, I should say, in the playoffs played a lot more man. They played a lot more aggressive coverage last year. And actually, the Bills were the team that were taking it to the Chiefs. They played a lot more man in this game. They were the more aggressive coverage team in this game. And that seemed to pay off and kind of forced Mahomes and forced the Chiefs to be less of a manufacture offense and force them to play left-handed and force them to kind of be more explosive. Force them to throw the ball down the sidelines. Force them to throw the ball down the field. And sometimes it worked, only a couple times. And then otherwise, it kind of didn't connect. There was like one big connection to Worthy that was actually out of bounds. Just examples like that where instead of getting the easy 5 or 6 yards that the Chiefs typically get on a first down, they don't get any yards, which results in a second down, which results in a third down, which results in 2 potential opportunities for rather the Chiefs to run the ball for 3 yards and make it 3rd and 7, or for the opportunity to rush the quarterback and have Greg Rousseau and AJ Epinesa and Von Miller, who had a huge sack in this game, to be able to get after Pat Mahomes. So those are key differences. I thought the Bills were the more aggressive coverage team, and without L'Jarius Sneed, it felt like the Bills were able to cook at wide receiver. Khalil Shakir, 8 catches for 70 yards in the slot, made a number of key catches, made some nice screen catches for first downs, breaking tackles, things like that. So quick, so shifty, tough to bring down in open space. I think he's one of the most underrated playmakers in the league right now. Curtis Samuel had probably his best game as a Bill. 5 catches, 58 yards, and a touchdown. Actually, Josh missed him on a third quarter series where he was running a crossing route. He maybe was going to take that for 50 yards. I mean, Curtis Samuel's very fast. And I thought the additions that the Bills have made, you think about how they've changed their receiving core. Shakir is quick, shifty, is tough to cover in the middle of the field because of that stop-start ability. And then his ability with the ball in his hands. He's very shifty. He can stop on a dime. He can make a guy miss. He can get those extra yards. Curtis Samuel is a burner. He's hard to cover when he's running a drag across the middle. He's tough to cover on crossing routes man-to-man because he's fast. He runs a 4.35, right? Like, that's a guy that can run. And then Amari Cooper, another guy that only 2 catches, but they were huge. 27.5 yards each catch, 55 in total. Dawson Knox made some big catches down the field, stepping up for Dalton Kincaid, 4 for 40. Matt Collins made a couple catches. James Cook did have 5 catches, but they limited him very well. He was actually one of the guys that kind of burnt the Chiefs last year. And then ultimately, one of the key difference makers, the Bills running backs didn't really run the ball too well. Ty Johnson, Ray Davis, James Cook. They got enough here and there in short yardage. They never really were stuffed in a 3rd and 1, 3rd and 2, 4th and 1 sort of scenario. But Josh being a 12-time runner in this game for 55 yards and that 20-yard scamper for the touchdown, that was substantial. And Josh really had to take this game on his back with 40 attempts. Throw the ball, 27 completions against the Chiefs. I mean, how many times do we see quarterbacks with 27 completions against the Chiefs? I don't know how many times we've seen that in the last 2 years. I'm not sure of the stat off the top of my head, but I want to say it's less than 3 quarterbacks that have had 27 completions against the Chiefs in the last 3 seasons, or the last 2 seasons, I should say. Worthy, I thought, had a good game for the Chiefs for the most part. He did have a touchdown, 4 catches, 61 yards. There was another one, like I brought up, that I thought they could have maybe got that they just missed. Worthy couldn't get his foot in. But Mahomes, I thought early in the game actually was playing. The first drive was a little rough. But after the first drive, I thought like the first 2 quarters, I thought Mahomes was actually playing pretty good. He was making some downfield throws. He was seeing the field pretty well. He wasn't forcing too much. It just felt like the Bills had really good coverage, a really good plan. They stuffed the run fairly well. Hunt at 4.3 yards per carry. Like I said, I think some of that came at the end. And a lot of the offense for Andy Reid was short passes, screens. McCole Hardman at one point became like a main emphasis of the offense on a couple drives. D-Hop, it felt like he had way more targets. I don't know how many targets he had, but only 3 catches for 29 yards. It felt like he had close to 10 targets in this game. He had a couple of conversions in key spots, but no one else really did anything. I mean, yeah, Noah Gray scored 2 touchdowns, but he had 4 catches for 23 yards. Travis Kelce was pretty much held out of the entire game. He had 8 yards on 2 catches. I don't remember the last time Kelce was limited that significantly in a big game. And whenever that happens, you're probably going to beat the Chiefs. Justin Watson at 26 yards. Like basically after Worthy, the next leading receiver is Hopkins with 29 yards. So give McDermott, first of all, a ton of credit. I've been very, very critical of him in these games against the Chiefs. I thought his defense played very well, good enough to win. I was proud that he did not allow a score late in that game to allow the Chiefs to come back, to allow the Chiefs to make it closer. The Bills just shut the door completely in the 4th quarter, and they really did a good job. So the 4th quarter, the 3rd quarter, I mean, 7 points in the second half, for the Chiefs. So, the Bills, man, what else is there to say here? Like, no sacks on defense. I thought the Chiefs defense didn't play too bad. I just felt like the Bills are just their offense is hard to stop. I mean, period. Right? Like they scored 30, but I thought everything was contested fairly well. I thought Spags wasn't terrible in this game. I just felt like, the Bills blocked them well. The Chiefs' pass rush suffered a little bit in this game. I thought that a lot of the catches were just incredible throws by Josh and good, tough catches against, guys that are contacting the receiver. like their run defense was solid against running backs. Could they have done a little bit better in the red zone? Perhaps. That's an area that they could have been better, and maybe that would have turned the tide of the game like it did in the divisional round. But I thought the Bills were Allen was just a beast, and he's the best quarterback in the game, man. He's the best quarterback in the game, in my opinion. So, and I've been saying that for a while. So I feel like, the Bills are this is what I think they are. This is what this is a proud moment for me, because this is something I picked the Bills and they came through. Okay. And they beat the Chiefs. I honestly don't care too much the Chiefs lost. I just like trolling Chiefs fans, and I like trolling the Chiefs. Honestly, they were going to lose at some point. It is what it is. But I think the Bills have been through a lot. Their fans have been through a lot. They have lost a lot of shitty games. This is not the playoffs, but I just feel like this team's a little bit different. There's something about this team, and I've been saying it for a few weeks. I just think their balance, I think their mental toughness, I think their experience, even McDermott to a certain degree has been more matured through his coaching. There's really nothing I can say that they really, besides the missed extra point and a fourth down where they should have had a maybe better play, or Josh should have made a better decision where he had a miscommunication with Dawson Knox. Maybe if that's Dalton Kincaid, something different happens on that play. But this is a Bills team that's still going to get Matt Milano back. This is a Bills team that's going to get Coleman back, that's going to get some players back, Kincaid. So the Chiefs will get Pacheco back, and I think Omenahue, but we could definitely see this matchup again down the road. I wouldn't be shocked by that. AFC Championship, AFC Divisional Round at some point, perhaps. But man, great win for the Bills. Josh Allen's that dude. Shakir, shout out to him. And the Bills O-line. And the Bills defense, man. Bills defense, big time stuff. Thought Rousseau, Von Miller, those guys, they got after Mahomes. They caused a lot of toughness out there. It kind of made the Chiefs resort to being a very much manufactured attack. So Buffalo wins it 30-21. They take it convincingly over Kansas City at home. The other afternoon games, one of them was an absolute shellacking by the Denver Broncos, 38-6. Denver destroys Atlanta. Now, Denver, for some reason, feels like their record is better than it is. It's 6-5, but it feels like the way people have talked about them and the way they've been standing for the rest of the season, for the entire season, it feels like they're like a 7-3 team or something like that, but they're 6-5, and this is their best win of the season, I think. This was an absolute dominant performance at home over Atlanta, another 6-5 team. So I think Denver, yeah, it's only week 11, so they're 6-5. I think that's the correct. It's not 7-5. I think that's correct. So yeah, 38-6. And this was another awesome statistical game from Bo Nix. 28 for 33, 307, 4 touchdowns. It doesn't get much better than that. 145 rating. But honestly, I thought last week Bo Nix played the best game I've seen him play. I'll have to go back and watch this one in full, because this one was on, my laptop. I was watching Chiefs. I was watching Niners a little bit more closely because this game kind of got out of hand. But this game was more about, I thought, Sean Payton masterclass in this game. I mean, dominant defensive performance as well against an above-average offense in Atlanta. Completely stuffed the run. Bijan only had 2.9 yards per carry. Cousins only had 173 yards. He threw an interception. They actually put Michael Penix in the game. Drake London had 3 catches on 7 targets for 61 yards. That was the leading receiver for Atlanta. So they held a really good offense to 6 points and barely allowed them to move the ball and barely had any possessions or dropbacks where Kirk Cousins was not under duress or not hurried or not contacted while throwing or not hit. Like, the Broncos defense was the story for me. But on top of that, Sean Payton's play calling, I thought, was superb in terms of the screen game was absolutely nuclear in this game. I mean, they had a number of big plays through the screen game. Every time I'd look, it was like, there's a touchdown, there's a touchdown, there's a big play, there's a big play. Or like a lot of outside stuff, like a lot of tosses, a lot of screens, a lot of swing passes, a lot of quick, easy decisions for Bo that made it very easy for him to put up huge numbers. I thought the play action game, Nix was also effective in that area. He threw a late touchdown to Jordan Humphrey, or little Jordan Humphrey, for the 41-yard touchdown. That was off of play action, just like a simple crosser about 10 yards down the field, wide open. He does the rest. Like, I thought this was a masterclass from Sean Payton, understanding what Bo Nix does well, and then Bo Nix going out there and executing it. 22 first downs for the Broncos, 6 for 11 on third down, 1 for 1 on fourth down, 105 rushing yards, 295 passing yards, 400 total yards for the Broncos offense. Their defense had 4 sacks. They threw 0 interceptions. They protected the football. 3 punts for the Broncos. That's it. Only 3 giveaways of the ball in terms of 3 stops for Atlanta because they didn't throw an interception. And then penalties were rather limited as well. Only 4 penalties. So Denver, domination up front, domination in the secondary, complete embarrassment for Atlanta. Atlanta was completely outcoached, completely outplayed, out-physicaled, out-everything. Cousins was rough to watch, 18 for 27, 173 an interception. He had a tough game. He had a tough time finding people open. He had a tough time making tight window throws. He had a tough time, moving around the pocket, maneuvering the pocket. They suffocated that pocket. Vance Joseph's defense with DJ Jones and Zach Allen and Benito and all these guys. The Broncos just, every play, it felt like, every play I'd look over, it was like, wow. Sometimes I would even be watching one of the other games and they would have already punted. I'm like, wow, that was fast. Like, there were times I was like, every time Cousins would drop back, there was a guy in his lap or around him. Sutton had another solid game as well, 7 for 78. Vele continuing to come through with plays, 66 yards. Little Jordan Humphrey, 52 yards and 4 catches. Mims had a touchdown, 49 yards. Javonte caught the ball. We saw a little bit of Javonte. We saw a little bit of McLaughlin. We saw a little bit of Estime. 9 carries for Javonte, 6.6 yards per carry and a touchdown. Impressive touchdown, I think, in the first half where he just buried a couple defenders on the Falcons. He got pushed all the way into the end zone. Big scamper for a touchdown there. Jaleel McLaughlin, he was effective in his role on the outside, getting carries. Estime, right up the middle. Bo Nix didn't run too much in this game. He only had 2 carries. What else? 2 sacks from Nick Benito. Again, absolute stud of a pass rusher. Loved him coming out of college. He continues to be a big-time addition for this defense last 2 years. Cody Barton had the interception on Kirk Cousins. Riley Moss led the team in tackles. Malcolm Roach also had a sack as well. Who's the guy that I really thought had a couple nice plays? Jonah Ellis, the rookie. He had a sack. He had a couple pressures in the game. I noticed him quite a bit in the game as well. And then you got to give shout-outs to Zach Allen and the guys in the middle. DJ Jones, John Franklin Myers, always very active. Falcons, meanwhile, just embarrassing performance. Defensively, Matt Judon did have a sack, but a rare sack by the Falcons. I thought Jesse Bates had some good plays, but overall, this is a poorly coached defense, poorly coached team, in my opinion. A rather limited offense, just in terms of when you can rush the quarterback. And I think the Falcons are a very overrated pass protecting unit. They are very much reliant on running the ball and running play action. And when those things are not there for them, I think that despite a couple 2-minute situations, they're pretty limited through the air, especially against a team like the Broncos that have good cover corners and force you to make tight window throws. And especially when you see Cousins now against man coverage, his game is limited because his arm isn't as strong or as powerful as it used to be. And those RPMs, that speed that he's able to put on the ball is just lesser than it used to be. So those windows get shrunk. Ray McLeod had 6 for 46, but holding Mooney to 27 yards on 2 catches is impressive. Holding Pitts to 1 catch for 9 yards is impressive. I thought Bijan actually tried his best. He just had nowhere to run. He made some nice catches, but it was an embarrassing game overall. I mean, the Broncos completely dominated. more time of possession, 400 yards to 226, more passing yards, more rushing yards, 6.7 yards per play to 4 yards per play. Like, yeah, that's complete domination. 38-6 Broncos statement victory. And then 20-17 was the other afternoon game. You know, I refer to afternoon because I'm on the West Coast and it starts at 1 o'clock. Seahawks upset the Niners 20-17 in San Francisco. This, though, wasn't much of an upset, in my opinion, despite the spread being about 6.5, 6, for a couple reasons. You know, we talked about it on the pick show. The Seahawks, huge game. Basically, if they lose this game, it feels like their season's over. They've got a bye week. They're coming off a bye week. Niners are beat up. You know, game time decisions in Nick Bosa and Trent Williams and George Kittle. George Kittle out of this game, did not play a single snap. Nick Bosa was not on the field. He left the game in the third quarter. He was not on the field for the final 2 touchdowns of this game by the Seahawks. That ended up being costly because they needed their big-time pass rusher out there to finish this game, to end this game, and they just weren't able to get the stop at the critical moment in the end, despite the Niners' defense actually playing pretty darn well for like 3 quarters of the game. And this is just another Niners defeat where it felt like they easily could have won. They're now 1-3 in the division. This one is more to me like, this is kind of like almost a predictive loss for me instead of a fluky loss like we've talked about with the Niners against the Cardinals and the Rams. Those were more fluky. This was an even game. This was a very even game. Either team could have won this game. This was more of a defensive game. And I felt like Seattle played one of their best games of the season. I know that it won't be indicated through stats, but I thought their pass protection was better than we've seen it in past weeks, thanks to an improved right tackle position from a returning Abraham Lucas, I believe it is, at right tackle. I thought their run game was okay, but it generated enough. Kenneth Walker individually played really well. He only had 3.9 yards per carry, but on some of those carries, he made it should have gone for a loss of 2. He got 3 or 4 yards. Jackson Smith-Njigba had 10 key receptions for 110 yards. He was a third down chain mover, a big chain mover at crucial moments. I thought DK Metcalf added an obvious element to the offense. Tyler Lockett was pretty quiet in this game. Geno Smith, I thought, did have a bad interception that the Niners executed on, and they came, they were able to jump on that. But otherwise, I thought Geno played darn well, especially in that last drive where he was surgical. He ran. He was able to run in for a 13-yard touchdown where it feels like if he stopped a yard or 2 or 3 short, I'm not sure if the Seahawks get more than one more playoff, if any plays. I mean, that was a very bold decision by him, but he saw the lane to go. He took off. He got it. And Geno was clutch in that moment. And I thought Geno and Purdy were both solid in this game. They made their mistakes. Purdy threw a tight window throw to McCaffrey that ended up getting deflected by Witherspoon and intercepted by Jonathan Hankins, which is extremely impressive for a mid-30-year-old nose tackle that's 330 pounds or something. So incredible play by that big guy. Meanwhile, I think Geno was picked off by, was it Brown or Mustafa or somebody? I can't remember. It was one of the younger guys, I feel like, on the Niners secondary that picked him off. Obviously, Niners were without Charvarius Ward in this game, who's always been so big against DK Metcalf. But unfortunately, his daughter passed away, so that was a big loss. Niners were without Kittle on offense. You could clearly tell, especially in the run game where it was so crucial. Juszczyk went down for a period of time. He came back, but Nick Bosa was the biggest. I mean, I feel like if they have Nick Bosa later in this game, they probably get off the field at least once. But, Niners, they just feel like a team that every drive, every game is tough for them this year. They're just really going through it in terms of mistakes, penalties, negative plays, shooting themselves in the foot, injuries. Man, this team is just wearing down. Geno, this entire year has been tough for them. McCaffrey hurt, Kittle hurt, Bosa hurt, Debo's been hurt, Jennings has been hurt, Trent's hurt, playing hurt. Everybody's been hurt, and it's and you can tell when they're playing, they're slow, they're sluggish, they're beat up, they're trying their best, they're fighting, but it's just not enough sometimes. And in this game, it just wasn't enough. This game wasn't a case where I can really say the Niners dominated the Seahawks. I would not say that. I thought this was probably the Seahawks' best game of the year from an all-around team perspective. Their defense played really well in terms of their coverage was very good. I thought they played a lot more man than we're used to seeing. And I thought Devin Witherspoon had a phenomenal game. We never even heard of Deebo Samuel in this game. I think that was because of Devin Witherspoon. I think Reek Woolen played decent. I thought that Julian Love played really well. Ernest Jones played well. Their D-line against the run was very good. The Niners did end up having 131 rushing yards. I want to say about 30 to 40 to 50 yards were Brock Purdy. Brock Purdy actually had a really good game running the ball. But a big problem for the Niners in this game were penalties offensively. They maybe took like 1 or 2 defensive penalties. They had 9 penalties in this game to the Seahawks 4. And I want to say 7 were on offense. And that was consistently killing their drives. Like, they would get 9 yards on first down. Then it would be, or like 8 yards on first down. Then they would be called back for 5 yards. Or they'd be called back for a hold once they get a 15-yard completion. Like, there were just swing points at that, in this game where it was like Niners would have a good play and then they'd get called for holding, or they'd get called for false start, or they get called for illegal formation or like something. And it was just like, man, each and every drive, there's something that's holding this team back on offense. Despite they had more first downs than Seattle, they were actually very good on third down, 7 for 11. They didn't have a lot of yards, though. They didn't have their typical yardage output. They only had 277. They did have 4 sacks defensively. I think Nick Bosa had 2 of them. And once Nick Bosa went out, it hurt. Leonard Floyd got 1 on the last series. Then I think they might have had 1 more sack. But, yeah, I mean, Seattle deserves to win. They came through in the end, and they won. And I think this is a big win for them. I thought this was their best game. Again, I think that moving forward, they're fully healthy. And I think this is where Seattle has kind of been a little underestimated. They came off the bye. I think Mike McDonald's a great coach. We've been talking about that all offseason. We know the Ravens clearly miss him. And I think he's made adjustments to his defense. I thought the run defense, just in terms of the fundamentals, was so much better, so much cleaner. Very hard for McCaffrey or anyone else to find running game or rushing lanes. I thought that Seattle offensively was pretty much what they've been all year. Like, they were a little bit more under center-ish. They're a little bit more play action oriented. And that helped, I think, just keep Geno clean a little bit more, especially on early downs. And I think it helped their first down efficiency and things like that. So that might have caught the Niners off guard, but like Seattle connected on 2 50-yard field goals. One of them was on a short field in the first half. Like, they only scored really they only had 1 good drive in the first half. Like, the other one was off the interception. In the second half, they had the desperation drive at the end, and they had 1 really good drive, and that was the drive that Bosa got hurt. So really, I can't blame the Niner defense as much as you would like to see them get a stop at the end. Geno's been great in those situations all year. We saw that against the Rams. We've seen that a number of times all season. He's great in those situations. It's hard to get him off the field on 4 downs. I can say, though, the Niners pass rush just didn't come through in those moments, and they didn't make enough plays in the coverage to be able to make those plays. I want to give a big shout out to Jawan Jennings, though. I mean, this guy's an absolute animal, absolute dog. 10 catches on 11 targets. I think like 6 of them were on third down. He had a touchdown as well in the game, which was a beautiful play design on the 1-yard line or 2-yard line from Purdy to Jennings play action. McCaffrey, again, was relatively quiet for his standards. He had 19 carries, 4.2 per clip, 79 yards. McCaffrey, I will say, does look a tick slow, just in terms of explosiveness and straight-line speed than we saw last year. He looks a little slow. Maybe with more action, he'll get faster and quicker. Maybe he needs a full offseason, but he does look not as good. And I thought the Seahawks were very much prepared for everything that McCaffrey and the Niners run game gave them. I would like to see Jordan Mason a little bit more involved, Isaac Guerrero a little bit more involved in the ground game moving forward. I think McCaffrey needs to be spelled maybe a couple more times per game, because I thought when Mason was in there, he actually ran all right. But Kittle was huge in this game. I feel like Kittle is a huge problem for Seattle. Not having him was huge. They have a big game next week against Green Bay. And the way Green Bay looked this week, that's a very winnable game. So Can they get to 6-5? This is a very, very competitive division. I mean, Seattle, they're 5-5. Niners are 5-5. Rams are 5-5, and Cardinals are 6-4. And all of these teams are going to be fighting down to the wire. Niners have some really tough games down the stretch, including Buffalo and Detroit, probably the two best teams in football. Can they find a way to win one of those games? Right? We'll see. But yeah, like so Seattle plays Arizona next week, which is a huge game. Like, I wouldn't be shocked if Seattle won that game. Right? Like, then they play at the Jets, which they should win. But again, Seattle going to New York, we'll see. That's a tough kind of a tough travel spot. The Jets look terrible though. Then they play the Cardinals again. Then they play the Packers and Vikings at Chicago, who looked a little bit better today. So that's a pretty tough stretch. Then they played their last game against the Rams. And the crazy thing is, the Cardinals play the Niners the last week of the season. The Rams play the Seahawks. Those are going to be huge games at the end of the day. And I feel like whichever team makes it to the playoffs out of this division, Niners, Cardinals, Seahawks, Rams, none of them are going to be easy outs. None of them. Especially, like Niners when healthy, depending on their health. Like I've been saying, they've been trying to gut out these games. But when you're missing, how much money is on the table there? Ayuk, Boza, Kittle, Ward, Greenlaw in one game. It's hard to win a team that's fully healthy, that's off a bye. That's why this was a pretty predictable upset. So, yeah, Seattle ends up taking it. Impressive win. Good game for Geno at the end. And huge win. And shout out to Mike McDonald, who I thought had his best game of the season. His team had their best game of their season. So Seahawks are back, baby. And this NFC West is going to be the division to watch down the stretch. Thanks, guys. I will be back after Sunday Night Football, and we'll talk about Sunday Night Football. Wow. What an epic, strange, confusing, and absolutely heartbreaking Sunday Night Football game. Now, am I happy that the Bengals covered the teaser? Extremely happy about that. But before we get to Sunday Night Football, I just exited a Discord conversation, a Discord argument with, of course, the drama queen himself, the self-proclaimed best fantasy player, best Madden player, although he's a jabroni in both, Kevin Durkant. Myself, Ultra, and Durkant, if you guys don't know, we have a show, BLV vs. Consensus, every week. If you become a member, $3 a month. If you become a patron, $3 a month. You can sign up to get that podcast. We preview every game. We talk about every team. We go back and forth. There's quite a few arguments every week about certain teams. And one of the teams is the Bengals. We'll talk about that. Another one of the teams is the Buffalo Bills. And I realize I've already talked about Chiefs and Bills, but I need to restate this because Durkant is the biggest D1 hater I have ever seen when it comes to the Buffalo Bills. I understand that he's a Miami Dolphins fan, but this is the same guy, keep in mind, that said the Bills would go 8-9 this season. They already have more wins this year than 8 wins. He also said the Chiefs would give Bills, quote, belt to ass. He also said that Lamar is better than Josh Allen, so on and so forth, right? So, he just stated that the Bills are not a threat for the Chiefs in the playoffs. He just said in the chat that the Ravens are better, all these teams are better, the Steelers are better than the Bills are nowhere close to the top of the AFC. And I just want to say, Durkant, that your head, I don't know what's happened to your head. It's probably so far up your ass that you need to get Ultra to help you out to remove it from your ass, okay? Because you are seriously smoking something like Sunday Night Football tonight, Bengals and Chargers. So forget what this guy Durkant says. He's a hater. He's biased. He's a jabroni. And that's all I got to say about that. All right? The Bills are for real. The Bills are the team to beat in the AFC. I don't want to hear anything else. They just beat the Chiefs. And it wasn't that close. Okay. Sunday Night Football time. 34-27, Chargers win. Somehow. Some way. In the first half, it looked like it was going to be maybe a blowout by the Chargers. But when there's a quarterback like Joe Burrow, and there's an inkling of a great explosive offense, T. Higgins in the lineup, Jamar Chase in the lineup, Chase Brown has to be mentioned in that conversation. Fantastic running back this year for the Bengals. And you've got Joe Burrow, a guy with ice in his veins, going out there and just continuously trying to get his team wins, trying to throw his team into games, trying to get his team back in this game. You knew, especially with the logo on the other side being the Los Angeles Chargers, lightning bolt, you knew that there was always a chance that the Chargers would charger and that Burrow would have ice in his veins and he would go Joe Shiesty mode, right? So that's exactly what happened in the second half. The Bengals put up 21 points and the game was tied at 27. And I think it was at halftime. The Chargers led by 18 points going into half. I want to say it was 24-6. The Bengals tied the game at 27. The game was actually 27-6 at one point. So it was a 21-point comeback. The Bengals tied the game at 27 with 12 minutes left in the game. There was still 12 minutes left in the game. And an entire fourth quarter went where no one scored until the very end with 18 seconds left, J.K. Dobbins. In between that, there was a lot of drama. There were 2 missed field goals by Evan McPherson, who has to be cut. The guy has, along with Zach Taylor's clock management, he should also potentially be gone after this year. He's horrible this year. McPherson has missed so many money kicks. For the guy that made his name on money kicks, he's been an absolute disaster this season in big moments, in big games. Absolute disaster. And I was rooting for the Bengals, I'm not going to lie. I had the Bengals plus 7.5. I did recommend Bengals for a best bet plus 1.5 on the spreads, although I didn't bet that in my real bets. But I also, I actually live bet the game at halftime, plus 16.5. So I ended up covering those. But I was upset because I want the Bengals to do well this year. I think you guys know that. I've been vocal about that. They're an exciting team. I don't think there's a more exciting team in the NFL right now than the Cincinnati Bengals. I think if you want the Bengals to lose, you're just a football hater. Like, I really can't understand why anybody would want the Bengals to lose. Especially in a game like this where, yeah, if you're a Chargers fan, obviously I get it. But the Chargers are 6-3, and if they lose, they go to 6-4. It's not really a big deal. They're probably still going to make the playoffs. We're still going to get Herbert in the playoffs, who, by the way, had an up-and-down game, but the first half was one of the best halves we've seen all year from a quarterback. Second half was a little rough, but he came through at the end. But to not want Joe Burrow and this offense and this team in the playoffs, considering their history as well in a one-game setting, is kind of wild to me. Like, they never say die, and they have lost so many dramatic games, so many heartbreakers this year. It's ridiculous. I mean, now they're 4-7, and they're pretty much going to have to sweep the rest of their schedule. Now, luckily for the Bengals, they might be able to do it, believe it or not, considering who they play. I would say the biggest hurdle will be having to play Pittsburgh twice. But I don't think it's outrageous to say they could beat them at least once. And if they beat them at least once and win the rest of their games, I think that would give them 9 wins, which one of those games includes playing the Broncos, which is the other team that they'll be head-to-head with in the AFC wildcard round. We just talked about the Broncos. Broncos look very impressive today. Broncos look like a playoff team, but the Broncos are one of those teams that I feel like could beat a lot of teams. They can hang with a lot of teams, but they could also lose to a lot of teams. They're 6-5. It's not outrageous to say that they'll win 3 and lose 4 for the rest of the year. I don't think that's really that crazy. Checking the Broncos schedule, they've got the Raiders, the Browns, the Colts, at LA Chargers, I believe, at Bengals, and then versus the Chiefs. So it might come down to We'll see how they do. They should beat the Raiders, but they've struggled with the Raiders. I think they did beat the Raiders earlier this year, but recent history suggests they kind of struggle with that game. Cleveland is just a weird team in general. Not even going to try to guess that game. The Colts, who are a weird team as well. The Chargers are tough in LA. The Bengals in Cincy, and then the Chiefs. I wonder if the Chiefs would actually let the Broncos win that game, if it's kind of determining whether the Broncos make it or the Bengals make it, because I'm sure, despite the Broncos nearly beating the Chiefs, I'm sure that they would actually rather have the Bengals miss the playoffs than the Broncos. So just throwing that out there, I think the Bengals, a lot of people will say their season is dead at 4-7, which is a crazy record to suggest it's not. But in this AFC, considering there's really nobody that's even in the conversation, like who else is in the conversation? Miami, like the Colts. There's not a lot of teams that are really floating around underneath Denver. Like Denver has separated themselves thanks to this loss to the Bengals and this win this week. But getting back to this game, crazy game. I was impressed by the Chargers. I have to say they're a better team than I gave them credit for. I've been unwilling to step fully in with the Chargers because it feels like, let's be fair, they really haven't beaten anybody until this game, where I would say they've beaten a good team here. They beat the Broncos, but that was a little bit earlier in the year, and it was, again, the Broncos are sort of an average team as well, and it's a divisional matchup. It's a rookie quarterback. I could see how that went down, but otherwise they haven't really played anybody, and all the good teams they played, like the Steelers, the Chiefs, etc., they lost to. So it was kind of like, it was hard to figure out. On top of that, they were largely built on their defense, a defense that has been benefiting off of a weak schedule of quarterbacks, weak schedule of offenses, passing offenses specifically, and they've been putting up great numbers because of it. Now, in this game, I thought it was a tale of two halves. I thought the first half, they got lots of pressure on Burrow. They stopped the run pretty well. They limited Chase. They limited the big plays to Higgins. They limited those plays, and their pass rush looked good. Their coverage looked solid, and Burrow just was not on his game early. And on the opposite side, I mean, Chargers had all the momentum. Herbert was just throwing absolute BBs, beams, like play after play after play into, out wide, like comebacks, quick outs, crossers over the middle, dump offs. He was keeping the offense, just on pace, within the structure. And he actually ends up being 17 for 36, which is a dramatic completion to attempt ratio. I think the Bengals played a lot tighter, a lot more man in the second half, and it felt like the Bengals were suffocating those receivers. That is kind of the weakness of the Chargers overall, and it felt like the Chargers struggled to separate in the second half until the very end of the game when Ladd McConkey had a couple big catches at the end to set up the touchdown ultimately for J.K. Dobbins, where it almost felt like mid-play the Bengals kind of decided to let him run for a touchdown. But honestly, Herbert was not really aided from a consistent running game, in my opinion, by J.K. Dobbins or by anybody else until really that big play. I mean, Dobbins only had 56 yards in the game, and 29 yards came off of that touchdown run. So that's 10 carries for like around 30 yards. That's not much. But I thought Herbert was phenomenal in the first half. He was just leading drive after drive after drive. Every time the Bengals would get a hint of momentum defensively, an incomplete pass, a sack, or not a sack, but a negative play, or like a stuff in the run game, he would just continuously come back with a great throw, with just a great idea of how to beat the coverage. Like whatever he was doing was working, and they were dominating the game on both fronts. So the Chargers were extremely impressive in the first half. It felt like the Bengals adjusted. They got their head out of their rear end, unlike their can't, and they came out on fire in the second half. Their defense was hitting. Their defense was flying to the ball. Their defense was playing tight coverage. Their defense was stopping the run. They were tackling, all that stuff. And then their offense, Joe Burrow just went into creation mode. He went into, okay, throw the team on my back. I'm going to make plays. I'm going to go crazy. They were almost in 4 down every drive mode where they were just going to go for it when they needed to. Higgins came up with big plays. Chase came up with big plays. Chase scored a touchdown on 4th and 2. Higgins scored a deep touchdown for 42 yards on 4th down as well. 2 4th down touchdowns. Jamar Chase scored a touchdown to tie the game again on a scramble drill. Burrow made some of the craziest plays and throws you've seen this year. One to Chase Brown that was spectacular, where it felt like he broke 2 sacks, and then Chase Brown made an incredible catch, and he ran after the catch. But that's not to take away from Herbert, who was just slinging the rock to all these different guys that nobody's ever heard of, right? And I think that's kind of like where I'm held back with the Chargers is we kind of saw the leaks in the defense in the second half. We sort of saw the receivers kind of having an inability to close this game because they were unable to separate and make catches and make difficult catches. And Herbert missed a couple. You know, they end up going 3 for 11 on 3rd down, the Chargers, which is why they really couldn't close the game until the very end. Both of these offenses put up over 400 yards. Both of these offenses had over 100 rushing yards. Bengals managed to be 3 for 3 on 4th down. Both teams had 24 first downs. Chargers had 3 sacks. Bengals had 2 sacks. 8 penalties for the Bengals, 5 penalties for the Chargers. There was one sequence at the end of the first half that I thought was very strange. I thought it was intentional grounding on Herbert, and they decided not to call that, which I think ended up being pretty significant. And the Chargers ended up tacking on a field goal at the end of the half instead of the clock running out, because they didn't have any timeouts. If that would have been intentional grounding, that would have made the clock run out of the half, and then it's 21-6 instead of 24-6, which actually probably would have played a significant role in the end of the game and how the game would have went. Now, I guess it loosens up a little bit that the Chargers were able to score a touchdown on their final, game-winning drive instead of just a field goal, because that would have been even more devastating. The fact that McPherson missed 2 kicks, and then you had that funky kind of series that nobody really thinks of now. Nobody's really brought it up, in my opinion. That was a little odd. It felt like that was definitely intentional grounding, but for some reason they didn't call it. But like I said, I was cheering for the Bengals. I was hoping they would come through. They just were not able to. Once again, their defense didn't step up at the very end, despite having a phenomenal second half where guys that I've never, really thought would come up. I thought DJ Turner in this game was phenomenal. I liked him coming out of the draft out of Michigan, fast kid. He ends up going down in the game. This kid, Josh Newton, I think's his name. I was going to call him Cam Newton, was making plays on the ball, playing corner out wide. The Bengals were getting pressure from guys like Osai. Hendrickson caused a key holding call, got some pressure in there. BJ Hill went down in the game. I mean, the Bengals were just fighting and clawing and scratching, and it just wasn't enough. It's just your kicker keeps letting you down in those spots. And it felt like if the Bengals would have just made one of those kicks, it was a momentum thing. You know what I mean? The Bengals just couldn't get that lead. 27 was like an invisible wall. It was like an impenetrable force. They couldn't get to 30 points. McPherson missed 2 kicks almost the exact same way. And the Chargers just kept getting opportunities around that same range where all they really needed was a couple first downs to get back into field goal range. And then eventually they break that touchdown. Shout out to Burrow, man. I thought that he played phenomenal in the second half. I thought he had a little bit of a rough start. He was kind of a little antsy under pressure. It felt like he was stepping up and stepping around into sacks and into pressure. Felt like he didn't really have an answer. He was trying to go down the field, and he couldn't really find the underneath stuff that was working. In the second half, whatever they did ended up working, and Burrow was dialed in. Burrow was in creation mode. Burrow was in Superman mode. Justin Herbert, it was his tale of 2 halves. He had a phenomenal first half, a lot like Burrow in the second half, where Herbert was rushing for first downs. Herbert was a scrambler. Herbert was throwing rockets down the seam for touchdowns and stuff like that. A Quentin Johnson 26-yard touchdown, a Will Dissly 29-yard touchdown, big-time throws down the field. And just every throw was into a tight window. And it felt like in the second half, every throw for the Chargers was into a tight window. They just weren't complete. There was a number of them that were right in the hands of the receiver, or the Bengals would punch it out, or get their hand in there, or force a hit where the ball would pop out. There was 4 of those throughout the second half where it was Herbert made a great throw and it's in the guy's hands and then it's popped out. A couple of them to Quentin Johnston, right? But man, this was a great contest between two awesome quarterbacks. I think both these guys are playing top 5 football in the NFL right now, arguably top 3 quarterback play, top 4 quarterback play in football right now. I think alongside Josh and Lamar, Burrow and Herbert have been the best quarterbacks this season. Mahomes is obviously in that top 5, but he's just not playing at this level, in my opinion, especially in terms of like inside structure, like downfield, big time, tight window throws, accuracy, power, all that stuff. I felt like there was a big play. I want to say it was a 3rd down before the first missed field goal for McPherson, where Burrow threw a corner route to Chase, and it was just a little late. He had to kind of escape out to his right. It was just a little late to get the ball to Chase. The ball didn't have enough speed on it, and the coverage was able to collapse down on Chase before it was caught. That was a big play, in my opinion. Lad McConkey, shout out to the rookie for showing up big in big spots. Will Dissly had 80 yards in the game as well and a touchdown. Chase Brown, I just want to give the guy credit for having 22 carries, for catching probably like 7 catches. I don't know how many catches he had off the top of my head, but the guy was playing on like every snap for the entire game. That is extremely impressive. I said that last week against the Ravens. I want to say like that was extremely impressive for that guy to play as much as he did. It felt like he never came off the field. T. Higgins was back in the lineup, and he went nuclear. I'm sure Patriots fans were happy to watch him. 9 catches, 148 yards, and a long touchdown. Brown had 5 catches and 22 carries. That's 27 touches for that kid. Joe Burrow ended up 28 for 50, 356, and 3. He keeps up his awesome pace of statistics, but the wins are something that he would rather have, and the wins are just not coming right now. This team is too reliant on their offense, too reliant on overall just winning shootouts and winning at the end of the game, and it just continues to burn them. McConkey officially had 6 catches for 123 yards. Tui Pelotu had 1.5 sacks in the game. I thought he had a really good game for the defense of the Chargers. I thought Henley had a solid game. Gilman had a solid game. Cam Hart is playing pretty well for them. Denzel Perryman is playing the best ball he's played in a couple of years. Tart played well. For the defense of the Bengals, I thought Mike Hilton mostly had a really good game. Jermaine Pratt had some energy out there. Trey Hendrickson, DJ Turner played phenomenal. I thought those were the guys that stood out to me. But that was a really well-played game, really good game. I hope both these teams find a way to make the playoffs. I know the Bengals are unlikely, but I'd like to see both these quarterbacks in the playoffs because we deserve this type of quarterback play. I want to see the best quarterbacks possible. To have an AFC potentially with Mahomes, Herbert, Stroud, Lamar, Allen, and Burrow, and then, whoever else, whether it be probably Russ, and Russ is a champion as well. To have that quality of quarterback play in a single conference in the playoffs, that would feel a lot like when I was growing up watching the AFC. That's really what it would feel like. So I hope that happens. I don't know if the Bengals will be able to bounce back here. But it feels like, man, they're just a weird team. Like, it feels like you watch them and it's like, man, is this not one of the best teams you watch every week? And somehow they still lose. Like, it's absolutely crazy to talk about this team. But it feels like every game you're watching them play, and it's like they're playing big-time ball. They're especially offensively. I mean, and they just can't come through. They just can't come through. This team is cursed this year. I don't know. It sucks. It sucks, honestly. But credit to the Chargers, who I have to say this was a statement for the Chargers, because just to me personally, because I think it shows that they can beat a big time offense, a big time quarterback. Even if you don't think the Bengals are a big time team, I think it shows that they can win this type of game, and they can win a bit of a shootout. And on top of that, I think it just makes them a little bit more legit. I mean, their defense will have better games moving forward, playing lesser offenses. Herbert just shows that this year, the way he's playing, he can go toe-to-toe with any guy across from him, regardless of the weapons. I'll also say one of the areas that really impressed me with the Chargers was their pass protection. I thought their pass protection pretty much all night was phenomenal, from picking up blitzes, from awkward angles, picking up stunts, just having Herbert protected to allow him to make throws and buy time, I thought was at an all-time high for them. Phenomenal stuff from the Chargers, especially at tackle. I thought they played really well in their pass protection. So that was a very fascinating Sunday Night Football game. You guys let me know your thoughts in the comments. Gronk, spike the like button if you haven't already. Okay, let's go back to the earlier games now and go through some of the games that I did see. I didn't see some of the games. I saw some spurts of games and things like that. I mostly saw pretty much the entirety of all the afternoon Sunday night games. The Patriots game I was live for during the early part. So there were moments. I focused a lot on the Packers-Bears. I saw a lot of that game. I saw quite a bit of Steelers-Ravens. So let's begin with the Packers and the Bears. I find that game pretty interesting. The Packers ended up winning 20-19. They advanced to 7-3, and the Bears are 4-6. The Packers, I did not think deserved to win this game, and I thought they played pretty poorly. When you look at the Packers statistically, they were out first down 23-19. So if you guys didn't see the game came down to a game-winning field goal. Off the top of my head, I think it was like around 45 yards out, somewhere in that range. It was manageable. It wasn't unrealistic. It wasn't like a 60-yarder. It wasn't a 30-yarder where it was like kind of assumed he would make it, but it was somewhere in that range where it was like he could miss, he could make it, but more than likely he'll probably make it. And it was blocked for the win. A lot like the Chiefs against the Broncos, except the Chiefs was even closer. It was like 32 yards. But, okay, I thought the Bears played their best offensive game of the season, which is good news for the Bears and Caleb Williams and the offensive coordinator change. Perhaps they got a spark there. We'll discuss that. On top of that, I thought this was Caleb's best game of the season from a consistency standpoint, from an understanding protection, getting the ball out standpoint, making big-time throws on big-time down standpoint. I thought Caleb was good. I also felt like the Packers defense struggled. They struggled specifically in coverage, I felt. Their pass rush at the end did come through with some plays, but it didn't end up being enough because they even converted after they sacked Caleb twice in a row on the game-winning drive. But they allowed nine first downs on third down. 9 first downs out of 16. The Packers only faced 5 third downs and only converted 1, and they also were 0 for 1 on fourth down in the red zone, where they strangely went for it. Not like inside the 3. It was like around the 5-yard line. They ended up going for it, and they didn't get it. They also missed a 2-point conversion, which would have ultimately put them up by 3 for the field goal of the Bears. If they hit the field goal, it would have went to overtime instead of, if they would have got that 2-point conversion after they scored the game-winning touchdown, the eventual game-winning touchdown. But I thought the Packers defense was very poor. They allowed 179 rushing yards. DeAndre Swift had 71 yards. Roschon Johnson also played a bigger role in this game than other games. Caleb was efficient. He was 23 for 31, 231. And the Packers on offense, they ran the ball pretty well. Josh Jacobs was a main component of the game plan, whether it be running the ball 18 for 76 and a touchdown, or even catching the ball. Wilson also was involved in that as well, quite a bit. Love had a pretty low volume game. He was 13 for 17, 261, a touchdown, an interception. He threw, I can't quite recall the interception. I want to say it was not the prettiest interception. It was in the first half. I remember it being in the first half. I don't quite recall why it happened, though, off the top of my head. But it was another play where I remember being frustrated by Jordan Love and just saying, like, this guy is holding this team back a little bit, holding this offense back. One area I thought Love was actually pretty good today was running. I thought he was actually pretty good scrambling. I thought the offense also found multiple ways to get open, deep shots down the field. And I thought the star of the game for Green Bay was Christian Watson, who had 4 catches for 150 yards and a huge one on the game-winning drive. Tom Brady actually made him the player of the game, which brought a tear to my eye as my guy Christian Watson was the star of the game, with my favorite player of all time giving him the star of the game. That's awesome. My guy, Christian Watson. Shout out Christian Watson. Reed also had a touchdown in the game. Jacobs had a touchdown as well for the Bears. Roschon Johnson and Swift both had rushing touchdowns. Caleb was not able to get a touchdown, but he also didn't throw an interception. I thought Caleb actually outplayed Jordan Love mostly. he did miss some throws. Like, he had his moments where he missed, like, an out route. He threw it, a little, like, short or something. Like, he had a few throws where he was a little off, like usual. But I thought for the most part, he was good against pressure. He scrambled well. I thought he threw the ball really powerful in this game, and he got the ball where it needed to go with pace and mostly kept the offense on task and in rhythm. This was also DJ Moore's best game in a minute. He had 7 catches for 62 yards, which was only 8.9 yards per catch, but he was also more involved as a manufacture touch player, screens, things like that. Keenan Allen also, I thought, had a pretty good game in this one. I'm going to have to pull up his stats. But ultimately, you look at the stats, the yards are pretty close to the same. Bears still had more. Bears had more first downs. Bears were better on third down. Bears were 3 for 3 on fourth down. Bears had more rushing yards. Bears had less sacks, but Packers had an interception. Bears didn't. The Packers only forced the Bears to punt twice, a team that's been punting more than anybody in recent memory. And the Bears also had more penalties, 7 for 50 yards, but the Bears outpossessed the Packers 36 minutes to 23 minutes. That was because of the run game, because of the scrambles from Caleb, because of the pacing of the offense by the Bears. It was very well constructed. It was a very good game plan. And the number one thing you've got to do to the Packers is you kind of got to make them, you kind of got to take, and this is the way the Packers play. I feel like this year they're way too reliant on explosives offensively. Way too reliant. They have very little consistency to their offense. They have very little rhythm to their offense. It doesn't feel like the Aaron Rodgers offense where there was a lot of long possessions, long drives, eat up the clock sort of deal. A lot of it was like a lot of it today is like 4 plays and a touchdown. That's why Jordan Love only had 17 attempts. Like, there was not a lot of long drives here, and the Bears were able to possess the ball 36 minutes, which keeps the Packers on the field. It's kind of weird because the Packers defense isn't playing well enough to get off the field, and at the same time, the Packers offense is almost playing too quickly for their own good. They're not kind of taking their time. They're playing very fast. So it's a weird mix of things, but the Packers did average 8.5 yards per play. They're very effective in that area, but they're also very, very explosive, lacking consistency, which I thought nearly lost them the game. And, okay, continuing to dive into the stats. The Bears, I wanted to check Keenan Allen and Rome Odunze. So Rome Odunze had 6 for 65. He had a couple down the field. Keenan Allen had 4 for 41. Roschon ended up with 10 carries. Caleb had 9 for 70, which stood out. So Caleb actually had over 300 total yards, which might have been the first of his career, or at least in that conversation. Yeah, I thought the Bears deserved to win 100%. They ended up losing, though, and I ended up covering the teaser. Unfortunately, the Packers weren't able to cover, but they were never really close in this game to covering, actually. The Bears were the better team here. They were up 10-7 at halftime. They're up 13-7. Then they trailed 14-13. Then they were up 21-13. I think. No. 19. Sorry. 19-13 for the Bears. Bears went for 2. They didn't get it. Then the Packers scored a touchdown, and they didn't get the 2-point, which made it 20-19 instead of 21-20. So, yeah, I was very disappointed in the Packers. I think they are kind of fraudulent right now. I don't like how their defense is playing. I don't like how their pass rush and coverage is playing in particular. And their offense is just a little bit too erratic, a little bit too explosive, reliant. Although it looks good on paper with yards per play, I don't think it's a winning formula against good offenses because it's hard for you to get off the field. Chicago is not a team that's been moving the ball and scoring points, and they look like a different team in this game. Give the new offensive coordinator, I think it's Thomas Brown, some credit, a former Carolina guy, for putting together a good plan and putting together the best pass protection, the best balance, the best Caleb that we've seen in recent weeks. So congratulations to the Bears for making this a game. It's unfortunate how the game ended. They should have won. but the Packers take it. I don't think the Bears are really in the playoff conversation. It's more about what can we get out of Caleb? How can we progress this kid? And overall, he looked a lot more respectable in this game because in the past couple of games, I feel like he's looked like the worst quarterback in the league. Against New England, against the Cardinals, the last 3 or 4 weeks, even against Washington, I thought he looked dreadful in those games. So it's good to see that he played a lot better. The Packers we're going to learn a lot about them coming up because they have a pretty tough schedule. Obviously, they play the Niners next week in Green Bay, which is going to be one of the biggest games of the week and an absolute must-win, it feels like, for both these teams, especially the Niners. Miami is a game at home that I don't think will be easy. That's also a primetime game. They play at Detroit and at Seattle back-to-back weeks, which is tough. This is a team that's already had the bye right before this game in Chicago, which is also another reason why I thought they would handle Chicago with relative ease because they were coming off the bye week, rested, prepared. LaFleur off the bye week's been good. It's the Bears. They've been playing terrible. They own the Bears. They haven't lost to them in so long. I thought this was going to be an easy win for the Packers. But anyways, the Niners, the Dolphins, the Lions, at Seattle. Then they play the Saints, who are looking a little bit more friskier, at Minnesota, and then Chicago again, who they just lost to. So this is actually a really tough schedule, in my opinion. If the Packers ended up dropping about 4 or 5 more games, the way they're playing right now, I wouldn't be too shocked. But if they can continue to get Christian Watson going, that might be something that can aid them down the stretch. I just feel like every time I watch him on this team and they actually have him involved, he's always a big part of their games. I just feel like They honestly have been a little bit too Wicks, a little bit too Dobbs focused. I think the guys that should really be getting the ball are Reed, Jacobs, and Watson. I think everybody else should just be add-ons to what they're doing. So 20-19 Packers in a game that they should have lost. Next up, we've got the Saints and the Browns. 35-14 Saints in a shocking blowout. In another game, the Saints win in which they got, absolutely ripped up defensively. They allowed 443 yards. And after this game, I checked because I started Jameis in one of my leagues. It's a 14-team league. It's my league. I needed a quarterback to play. I like the matchup. Why are you starting Jameis, Mitch? He actually had 30 points in that league with 6 points per touchdown. He had nearly 400 yards. Too. So I looked at his stats. I'm like, how did the Browns only score 14 points in this game? How did they? And this is one I'm going to have to go back and maybe watch condensed film or something. Because how? 22 first downs, 443 yards, 377 passing yards. Third down, they were bad. Fourth down, they were bad. I guess that makes sense. They weren't able to execute in the red zone quite effectively enough. But early in this game, it was wild. It was just explosive touchdown after explosive touchdown. Jerry Jeudy had a 89-yard touchdown. Valdez-Scantling had a 71-yard touchdown. Elijah Moore had a 30-yard touchdown. Taysom Hill had a 33-yard touchdown. Every touchdown was a home run. Taysom Hill had a 75-yard touchdown late in the game. Taysom Hill had a nuclear fantasy performance. He had 40 points in fantasy. The Saints had 473 total yards. 214 rushing yards, mostly by Taysom Hill. Taysom had 8 catches for 50 yards. He also had, over 100 rushing yards. I don't know why I'm coughing. Yeah, let's look this one up. But to me, what I saw, I was just genuinely shocked by the Browns' defense. I was shocked by their performance. I was shocked by the Saints' ability to move the ball. I was shocked by the pass protection that Derek Carr was getting early in this game. He was 21 for 27, 248, 2 touchdowns. Alvin Kamara had a solid day, 67 yards on 16 carries. But Taysom Hill was the story between his receiving, his rushing, and then also his mistakes. I recall that he got stripped for a fumble, and he also threw an interception. So it was a wild game for Taysom Hill. He had 18 yards passing. He had 138 yards rushing on 7 carries and 3 touchdowns. And he had 50 yards receiving. Marquez Valdez-Scantling has been a heck of a pickup. He scored on a crossing route off play action, I think. I think it was off play action. Derek Carr hit him, and he just ran past everybody. He's a fast guy. He had a He had a 70-plus yard touchdown, and, 2 catches, 87 yards, led the day. Foster Moreau pitched in. Jawan Johnson, their tight ends, pitched in. Alvin Kamara, as always. Defensively for the Saints, they did pick up a couple sacks. Brian Brzee showed up with 1.5, and Granderson had 1. And then Jameis Winston, 30 for 46, 395, 2 touchdowns. Weirdly enough, they lost 35-14, and Jameis did not throw an interception, which is very strange. Nick Chubb kind of, not his best game. 11 for 50, 4.5 yards per carry. You expect better than that. Jerry Jeudy did have a good game, 6 for 142 and a touchdown. Elijah Moore, 6 for 66 and a touchdown. Njoku, 9 for 81. But I thought this was more about the Browns. The Browns defensively, they allowed this many points, this many rushing yards. I don't know if this was like a Ronnie Brown Wildcat thing where they just couldn't figure out how to stop Taysom Hill. It was very strange, to be honest with you. Because the Browns they're not the same defense they were last year, but this is certainly a better defense than they showed today, and they have been better this year than, a lot of other defenses. So to allow 473 yards, I got to put respect on the Saints for this performance. They've been very good at home lately. We'll see if they can continue to go on this stretch run here to get themselves back in this season. They're 4-7. Maybe they can get back to respectable levels. Right now, I have to move them up in my power rankings. I think I have to move the Browns down. I think I have to say the Browns are kind of becoming unbettable for me because on paper, this team is not this bad, but they end up losing by 21 points. And this isn't even a game where you can really blame Jameis because it's not like he threw a bunch of interceptions. They didn't fumble. It's a very weird game. Actually, the Saints were the team that turned it over. If you would have told me that before the game, I would have said, yeah, the Browns probably won. So this is just one I'm gonna have to think about the Browns moving forward. But the Saints are almost becoming unbettable to me as well because I don't have a good calculation of why they've bounced back so effectively. Obviously, Carr has come back and he's playing pretty well. He played efficient football. They figured something out here with Taysom Hill. Marquez Valdes-Scantling's become a factor. But I thought this team would be more affected by the offensive line, more affected by the receiver injuries than they have been. Their defense still isn't playing that well. They got some fourth down stops, but I don't know. It was a weird game. Saints fans, let me know in the comments what you think of that game for sure. Vikings Titans 23-13. I'm not going to lie. I really didn't see any of this game, so I'm just going to kind of give it a shout out. 24 first downs for the Vikings to 11 for the Titans. 318 yards for the Vikings, 294. This is a game I'm going to have to go back. I'll probably watch a little bit of it, some of the highlights. I think I have a pretty good idea of how it went. The Titans are just almost an unwatchable football team. They're extremely bad. I think they're a bottom 3 team in football. Strangely, they dominated my Patriots, but I don't know, man. I know the game went to overtime, but it felt like they dominated. The Vikings didn't have that many yards, which is pretty typical for a team that plays Tennessee, but they did have 24 first downs, which is a pretty high number. But they only managed 318 yards total. They did get 5 sacks defensively, which is also a common theme against Will Levis and the Titans. They give up a ton of sacks. Levis also threw an interception, and both teams punted 5 times. The Titans also had 13 penalties for 91 yards. I wonder how many of those resulted in first downs. That's also something I wouldn't know unless I watched. 32 minutes of possession. Darnold, 20 for 32, 246, 2 touchdowns. The big thing with Darnold and the big thing to take away from the Vikings is he didn't turn it over. He didn't have boneheaded plays, and that's something that's been common the last couple of weeks. He's been really bad in terms of turning it over, and he's been costing his team points in the red zone. He's been costing his team the ability to close out games. Cam Akers was pretty active as well. He scored a touchdown later in the game, complimenting Aaron Jones, who struggled in this game, 15 for 39, 2.6 yards per carry, which is not, again, atypical of playing the Titans. They're very good against the run. I wouldn't worry about that, Vikings fans. Also, a relatively quiet game for Justin Jefferson. Addison had a 47-yard touchdown. No touchdown from Justin Jefferson, though. Also pretty odd to see that. But the Vikings get another win. So the Vikings right now are sitting at 8-2, which is insane. Insane. The Steelers and the Vikings, they're in interesting spots right now, as teams that nobody really thought would have these records, but they're there. They still kind of feel like they're competitive, but are they contenders? It feels like they're more pretenders, but at the same time, like, given how they're playing and what their record is, you kind of got to respect them. That's kind of how I view the Vikings. They're similar teams too. Yeah, like even the Titans even had more yards per play in the game. Checking out the player stats, Jefferson had 6 for 81, which is not a bad game, but kind of underwhelming for him. Andrew Van Ginkel with 2 sacks, Patrick Jones with 2 sacks, Blake Cashman with 1 sack made the 5. For Tennessee, they got Kenneth Murray and Arden Key, who continues to have a good season with a sack. I feel bad for this defense because they've actually played well all year. Calvin Ridley had 4 for 58. Not a crazy game, but not bad. But the Titans just couldn't run the ball. 9 for 15 for Tony Pollard is not good enough. Will Levis was your leading rusher. That's not good enough. So, yeah. Titans suck. Vikings are decent. They win by 10. Pretty self-explanatory. The Lions kicked the living shit out of the Jacksonville Jags 52-6. I did not turn this game on for a single second. But let's just put it this way. The Lions had 645 yards and 38 first downs. 449 passing yards. Jared Goff was 24 for 29, 412 passing yards, and 4 touchdowns, 158 passer rating. A big bounce back Jared Goff spot, as we thought it might be. Amon-Ra St. Brown, 161, 2 touchdowns. Jacksonville, meanwhile, no offense to speak of. 2 for 10 on third down, 1 for 2 on fourth down, 10 first downs, which is pathetic. 170 yards. They punted 5 times. The Lions punted 0 times. The Lions had 39 minutes of possession. The Lions didn't let up that much, to be honest. There's been games that they've let up. This was not one of them. This was a statement. This was an ass kicking. This was an annihilation. The Lions still scored 24 points in the second half despite being up 28-6 at halftime. They scored 10 points in the fourth quarter when it was 42-6. So, Mac Jones, not an NFL starting quarterback. Jacksonville, bad offensive line. They're really bad on offense right now with Mac in there. Trevor, I think you've got to kind of give him some credit right now just because this team looks awful with Mac. They just have no explosiveness with Mac when he's in there. And then the run game was pathetic. Travis Etienne, 12 for 27, 2.3 yards per carry. Brian Thomas still managed 82 yards, but really nothing from the game for the Jacksonville Jags. And their defense continues to be awful in coverage. 24 completions for 400 yards is like ludicrously awful. So I'll probably watch the highlights just to see exactly what took place there. But Lions fans, let me know what you thought of that historic win for the Detroit franchise. Congratulations to you guys. And this is just the type of win which makes me feel confident about the Lions at number 1 in the power rankings. This is just a type of win that only I think like 2 or 3 teams in this league could do. I think the Ravens could manage this type of win, believe it or not, given that they're 7-4, but they still have that explosiveness. And I feel like Buffalo could probably put up a win like that. But even the Chiefs are not managed. They're not putting up 52 on anybody. They're not scoring 30 right now on anybody. So for the Lions to be able to put up 52 in an NFL game, that's 07 Patriot shit. That's really impressive. So 52-6, Detroit Lions. The Indianapolis Colts and the Jets, 28-27, Colts win. I've been highly critical of the Colts and Anthony Richardson. Colts 5-6. They're in the mix for the wild card. It is weird to me that the Colts decided to start Joe Flacco against the 2 best teams they've played all year. That's a little odd that they decided to start Joe Flacco against the Texans defense and the Vikings defense, and then they put Anthony Richardson back in against this dreadful, historically bad Jets defense, in my opinion. They are so bad right now, the Jets defense. But Anthony Richardson looked much better, and I think this was his best game he's had in a long time. Even from the glimpses I saw, I thought he was throwing the ball better, more accurately. He was making big plays down the field, 20 for 30, 272, and 1 touchdown through the air. Pierce has been really good for them. Downs had 5 for 84 and a touchdown. And another heartbreaking loss for Aaron Rodgers and the Jets. They were very much in this game. The Colts were dominant early. They were up 13-0, but then the Jets quickly responded, going up 14-13. It was then 16-14, and then 17-16, a little bit of field goal contest. Then I think the Jets were up 24-16 at one point. The Colts then scored again, failed the 2-point conversion. Jets got the lead again, and then Anthony Richardson scored a rushing touchdown to take the lead, and then the Jets couldn't score at the end. So, yeah, I mean, the Jets' defense sucks. They can't stop the run. They can't stop explosive pass plays right now. They can't tackle that well. This is just a team that's, and offensively, they're pathetic. Their scheme is pathetic. 10 first downs against the Colts. 10. Like, as much as I want to say the Jets' defense is overrated and all that shit, the Jets' offense having 10 first downs and going 4 for 13 against the Colts' defense is an all-time low for Aaron Rodgers. This is not the 2015 Broncos where Aaron Rodgers threw for 70 yards or whatever. This is the 2024 Indianapolis Colts Gus Bradley outdated defense. He had 10 first downs, 4 on third down for 13, 0 for 1 on fourth down, 162 passing yards with Devontae Adams and Garrett Wilson. Their only successful offense was Breece Hall, who had 78 yards, 4.9 yards per carry, an 18-yard touchdown, and then also receiving touchdown, 29-yard touchdown. Rodgers statistically wasn't bad, like 22 for 29, 184, 2 touchdowns. But like, the numbers speak for themselves. 10 first downs, 253 yards. Like, that's not good enough. So, yeah, Rodgers is washed. The Jets suck. The Jets are done. Stick a fork in them. Don't want to hear from them anymore. I just want to pretend they don't exist. And I honestly was pretending this game doesn't exist because the Colts have kind of disgusted me all year, and the Jets are just an absolute joke. So I kind of didn't really even pay too much attention. I just kind of was wondering how Anthony Richardson would play, and I thought that he was just much better overall. Just from an accuracy standpoint, I just thought he made less bad throws. There was a couple in there, but I think the completion percentage speaks for itself, 20 for 30. And he was able to bounce back against a team that is just playing awful football. Awful football. They gave Jonathan Taylor 24 carries he only had 57 yards. Pierce, again, like I said, 24 yards per catch. Big downfield threat. One of the best in football right now. Josh Downs, sweet slot. Mike Pittman kind of struggled again, 5 for 46. 2 sacks from Kwity Paye on Aaron Rodgers. This offensive line for the Jets has been a little bit lackluster. Braylon Allen no longer a mention in the offense, only 2 carries in the game. Breece Hall had 16 for 78. Don't understand why the Jets have not become more of a run-heavy team. Don't really get it. Devontae Adams, 6 for 72. And Garrett Wilson, kind of invisible, 4 for 18. Aaron Rodgers, dink, dunk, diddly, do. Lose 28-27. What else do we got? The Raiders and the Dolphins, 34-19, Miami Dolphins. Miami Dolphins. Miami Dolphins survived. This game was, I think, a little bit more competitive than the score. It's just that the Raiders are not good in the red zone. And they kind of, I guess they were a little bit better today than usual. But they couldn't come up with enough stops against the Miami offense that was kind of back this week after a little bit of a rough performance on Monday night. Miami had 25 first downs, but the Raiders had 22. The Raiders also converted 8 third downs on 14 attempts. The Dolphins converted the same, 8 for 12. Both teams were 2 for 2 on fourth down. The Raiders, I think, a couple times in the red zone, if I'm not mistaken. Only 82 rushing yards for the Dolphins, but they found their explosive passing game once again in this game for a 57-yard touchdown to Jonnu Smith in the fourth quarter. They also got Tyreek Hill a touchdown in the game as well. That was only an 8-yarder, but he he did get back in the end zone, which is nice to see. What else? Minshew did throw a pick, but he had one of his better games, 282 yards, 30 for 43. He was constantly chasing in the game, though. Miami was ahead for a large majority, and Miami was never really threatened, in my opinion. 10-6 at half, 17-16, I think the game might have been at one point. It was close at one point. And then Miami kind of exploded in the fourth quarter again. Shane, Jonnu get touchdown. Sanders finishes it with a field goal. What else? But Miami, again, you wonder what their record would be if Tua... It feels like they'd be a 5-5 team if Tua didn't get hurt, because they probably beat the Colts that one game where Huntley played. They're probably 5-5, and they could have won that game regardless. Imagine if they did win that game. They'd be right in the mix for a wild card at 5-5 right now. Their defense, I thought, was a little lackluster in this game compared to past games. But their offense, I thought, got a bit of a bounce back, which was kind of expected at home against the Raiders. Brock Bowers did have a phenomenal game. 13 catches for 126 yards and a touchdown. Shout out to him. Raiders continue to struggle to run the ball. Madison, 5 carries for 19 yards. Jonnu Smith continues to shine as the third option, or probably the second option at this point, as Jalen Waddle has become invisible. If anyone can find Jalen Waddle, please let me know. Jonnu Smith, 6 for 101 and 2 tutties in the game. But, yeah, not a lot to say. This is kind of an expected result. The Raiders are one of the worst teams in football. They lost this game by 15. The game was somewhat competitive. 17-12, Miami over the Raiders at one point. But then, again, Miami took control 24-12. Then it was 24-19. Minshew bounces back to Abdullah. Then 31-19. They just couldn't quite get the game to go their way for the Raiders. But relatively even statistically, just Miami was just slightly better. Dolphins, statistically, it's Tyreek, 7 for 61 and a touchdown. That probably is his best game in a minute. Not too much on defense for the Dolphins. A sack from Calais Campbell again, Emmanuel Ogbah, Zach Sealer. And then for the Raiders, a sack from Adam Butler. But they largely struggled to get any pressure. Sack from Tyree Wilson as well. Max Crosby quiet again. Raiders struggling. It feels like if their defense plays well, their offense doesn't play well. It feels like if their offense plays well, their defense doesn't play well. This was a game their defense didn't play that well. Steelers and Ravens at 18-16. Steelers take it. One of the games of the day. Disappointing effort from the Ravens. I felt like they were poorly coached in this game from what I saw. Harbaugh made some dicey, interesting decisions at the end of the game. Kind of confusing why he didn't try to onside kick it potentially, maybe. Also, felt like play calling was kind of I thought the Steelers kind of outcoached them, to be honest. I also felt like Tucker was awful. They probably win this game if Tucker makes a field goal. He missed, I think, 2 kicks, maybe 3, but I think he missed 2. Boswell made a number of kicks, and that could have, at the base level, that might have been the difference in the game. Boswell hit 32-yard, 52-yard, 32-yard, 57-yard field goal, 27-yard, 50-yard field goal. He made 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 field goals. They didn't score a single touchdown. They beat the Ravens. Imagine being Joe Burrow hearing that stat. But the Steelers managed enough offense against a team that shot themselves in the foot, wasn't as good offensively as typical. Lamar wasn't as good as typical. And the Steelers just have the formula against the Ravens. And I'm not exactly sure why more teams aren't able to replicate it or don't study it. But maybe this is a page that people can steal. Maybe this is something that people can look at. The Ravens did manage 329 yards, which isn't horrible. But they were less efficient on third down, 4 for 11. They only had 16 first downs. For them, that is not insanely good. They were sacked 2 times. Lamar was 16 for 33, 207, 1 touchdown, 1 pick, a 66 passer rating. The interception was not his fault. I think it was caught by the receiver, and then it was torn out of the receiver's hands and intercepted by Peyton Wilson. It was one of the best interceptions you'll see all year. Shout out to Peyton Wilson, my number 1 linebacker in the draft. Dude is a dog, okay? He's been very good as a rookie. Doesn't get enough credit because he's on a stacked defense and he's kind of a role player, but he's been awesome for them. Russ wasn't bad, 23 for 36, 205. Did throw an interception. He wasn't great, though, but the guy that stood out for me was George Pickens, 8 catches, 12 targets, 89 yards. Zay Flowers did have a touchdown, but he was relatively quiet, only 2 catches for 39 yards. Derrick Henry had a solid day, but he only managed 13 carries, which was kind of crazy by the Ravens. Maybe that was because the Steelers kind of got the lead and the Ravens got away from the running game, but that kind of seems to be a common theme for the Ravens, where in these big games, Derrick Henry becomes less of a factor and he becomes less important in the game plan. I don't really understand why that is. I don't understand why they become so pass happy against good teams. I don't really get it. But Steelers field goal, then field goal 6-0, then it's 7-6 Ravens, then it's 2 field goals for the Steelers. They're up 12-7. Then a field goal for the Ravens. You know, the Steelers kind of felt like they always had the lead, and the Ravens were always in distance to win the game, but they just never could make the plays necessary to win the game. At the very end, they scored a touchdown to Zay Flowers. The game comes down to a 2-point conversion, and they don't get it. Lamar runs around in circles. He's not able to find somebody open. He kind of flips it over to the middle of the field. He doesn't get it. So Najee Harris ran hard, 18 carries, 63 yards in old school Steeler fashion. Penalty-wise, 12 penalties for the Ravens for 80 yards, which is a lot. 7 penalties for 45 yards for the Steelers. But the Steelers, again, field goal kicking, possession, running the ball. Ravens didn't do either of those. Didn't kick the ball well, didn't run the ball a lot efficiently, and that cost them time of possession. 36 minutes of possession for the Steelers, 23 for the Ravens. 23 minutes for the Ravens offense. A lot of that had to do with third down, 4 for 11 on third down. A lot of that had to do with not running the ball with Derrick Henry, only 13 carries. He had 5 yards a carry. That feels like he should get more attempts, but maybe I'm crazy. I don't know. There were a couple of screens to Derrick Henry off the top of my head that I do remember. Yeah, I thought the Ravens struggled to cover Pickens in big moments down the field at times. I thought the Steelers played a lot of, I think, man coverage from what I saw, and they were really testing these receivers a lot. Deontay Johnson in his revenge game did absolutely nothing. Isaiah Likely did have a couple good catches, 4 for 75. He led the team in receiving for the first time since probably week 1. Bateman only had 2 catches. Hill, 4 for 28. Andrews was quiet, 2 for 22. Aguilar almost had an insane catch, but I think it was called back for illegal motion or something by the offense. He had a crazy catch on that final game-winning drive, but they still ended up getting it anyways. Owe had 2.5 sacks on Russell Wilson. The Ravens actually did get sacks on Russell Wilson. He's a guy that does typically take more sacks, though. And the Steelers, Justin Fields had some rushing yards in the end to close the game out. They used him wisely, in my opinion, in that moment. He slid a little short of the first down, and then they ended up getting it with Najee Harris, I think. Najee had a solid, 3.5 yards per carry, but it was an effective 3.5 yards per carry. Jalen Warren had 4.6 on 9 carries as well for 41 yards. Washington had a big catch in the game. He had 2 for 42. And what else? Ben Skoranek, shout out to him. He actually had a catch in the game. TJ Watt had a sack. Peyton Wilson had the interception. Dean Lowry also getting on the board with a sack as well. Minka, I thought, had a great game. I thought Minka really stood out. Wilson stood out. Queen stood out. Who else? Those guys really contributed to stopping Lamar Jackson. Queen's speed, Wilson's speed, Minka's ball tracking. And you got to give credit to the secondary as well. Even guys like Dante Jackson just like just being just like their secondary in general, just being like good in coverage. I don't know if Dante Jackson's the right one. I don't even know if he played in this game, but you get my point, okay? Not Dante Jackson. But yeah, Minka, Porter, Elliott, just tight coverage across the board. I think Dante Jackson played. I can't remember. Ravens, defensively, not horrible, but again, like, not too impressive. Like, the Steelers still, they didn't score touchdowns, right? But they managed 6 field goals, right? Like, they managed 6 field goals. So it wasn't like it was an incredible day from the Ravens defense. So, they have to be better in those spots where the Ravens need to win a defensive game. It feels like they're not really able to this year. So that's tough. I think I've covered every game except for the Patriots. I always like to end on the Patriots. This is the game I streamed. Rams win it 28-22 over the Patriots. Stafford shines, in my opinion. Drake May also was amazing in moments. A duel between past and future. Stafford, 18 for 27, 295, 4 tutties, 142 passer rating. Drake May, 30 for 40, 282, and 2 touchdowns. He did have an interception at the end of the game, on the potential game-winning drive where they were down 28-22. They had time left to go down the field and score. May and Douglas just not on the same page. Douglas runs a route that May wasn't expecting. May throws the ball, and it's intercepted. It was unfortunate, but that was his lone interception. He did fumble. He got strip sacked, which is partly on the offensive line, partly on Drake May, as always. Another one of those where it was from behind, where he didn't really see it. He was strip sacked. That was a big play to kind of catapult the Rams into the lead and in control of this game. But honestly, I thought the Patriots played well, especially on offense. I thought their defense kind of shit the bed in this game. But offensively, this was probably like one of their best games they've played all year, considering the opponent. The Rams have been a good defense lately, especially their pass rush. They're a tricky defense. They play a lot of different coverages. They blitz quite a bit. I thought the Patriots offense was really good. Drake played really well, which is expected at this point, but the kid's a baller. 30 for 40. He was as accurate as ever. I thought he was as consistent passing the ball as he's been all year. He was elusive. He ran a few times. But, man, he was dealing from outside the pocket, off play action. He was great in the RPO game. He was really good on third down. Drake is awesome. I think Drake is already a top half quarterback in the NFL already, and that's being like reasonable. I feel like he's maybe closer to, if you were to ask me like who's better, I know that Geno played well today, but like who's better, Geno or May? Like, I don't know. Drake May might be better, to be honest. Like, Drake's really good. Like, if Drake had any support on his team, and that's, it's tough to say that when your team plays well, but really, you don't have that upper echelon talent at receiver. You don't got a good running game. Your offensive line is definitely a below par. Your defense shit the bed. Like, what do you really have out there? I actually thought Alex Van Pelt, a lot of Patriots fans want him fired. I thought he actually had a really good game. There was maybe one moment where they false started on a 4th down where Van Pelt looked like he wanted to run some sort of tricky, like, direct snap run for a 1st down, and they false started. It was on Jalen Polk for lack of execution. He sucks. Jalen Polk, once again, terrible. But that was probably one play where I was just like, just quarterback sneak it. It's 1 yard. If Drake May's 6'5", like, just give him the ball, let him run. Even just like direct snap to Drake May and just run the ball up the middle, like Cam Newton it or Josh Allen. But I guess they don't want to do that. I would do that a little bit more with a big kid like Drake who can he's quick and fast and twitchy. I would just run him in that scenario. But that was the one moment where I was like, that was a shitty call on 4th down. They should have done that. And then it, kind of ended up having them result in a field goal. instead of going for it and getting it on 4th and 1. There was another scenario where it was 4th and 2 at like the 2 or the 4 or something. And I think it was 4th and 2 at the 2. I think it was like 4th and goal at the 2. And they ended up kicking a field goal. Gerard Mayo. This is on Gerard Mayo. Instead of going for it, I would have went for it in that scenario. I don't really understand why they didn't go for it. So that was when the game was 24-10. And the Patriots decided to make it 24-13 instead of going for it to make it 24-17. The Patriots actually outscored the Rams in the fourth quarter 9-0. I feel like if the Patriots score on that drive a touchdown, they might have tied the game and went to overtime or something. And then they even could have won the game on the last drive if they don't mess up. It was kind of crazy that they were given the opportunity in the end because their defense just didn't play well for like a full 2 quarters. Like the second and third quarter, they were awful. They couldn't get a stop. The fourth quarter, they were really solid. I thought they made some nice stops. Jonathan Jones with a pass breakup. First quarter, I thought they were pretty good as well, but like second and third, they were bad. They allowed like all the points in the game. They allowed 28 points in the second and third quarter. And I want to say it was all the Rams' possessions. One of them was a short field. I'll grant them that, but overall, not good. But Patriots offense is the story for me. I'm very excited. This is the best performance I've seen outside of that like Bills game that they had last year. This was one of the best offensive performances that I felt like was actually transferable for future games in a while. This is something to build on. 382 yards, 125 rushing yards. Stevenson had a solid game, 257 passing yards, and only 2 punts by the Patriots, and 7 penalties for both sides. 37 minutes of possession for New England to 22 for the Rams. Rams were 2 for 8 on third down, but the Rams were just exploding on the Patriots. Like they were 2 for 8 on third down. They only had 19 first downs, but they had 400 yards. And that was because the Patriots got beat on the blitz consistently, and they got beat down the field early. Cup, would beat them. Nakua was killing them in the first half. I want to say he had like 100 yards in the first half alone. Like, it was bad. Cup also went for 100 yards. When you allow Cup and Nakua to have 200 yards, you're not a good defense, and you didn't prepare for this game very well. Their usage of Christian Gonzalez was absolutely disgusting. They're putting him on, the wide receiver, which was like the perimeter guy, the X, which was typically Demarcus Robinson, which is a waste. Kyron Williams also was efficient in this game, 15 for 86 and 5.7 yards per clip. Like, really nothing the Patriots did. Coverage, blitz, run stuffing, none of it was good. None of it. Duggar was back. Barmore was back. None of it was good. No excuses. Wise was out, but that's about it. There's no excuses. I actually thought this was Kendrick Bourne's best game of the season, 5 for 70 and a touchdown. I thought that Douglas played well. Henry played well. Hooper played well. The Patriots O-line played pretty well against a good pass rush. The Rams have a good pass rush. And Drake navigated the pocket well, made some throws under pressure well, stepped up, stepped around pressure well. Drake played phenomenal. I thought he played really well. Definitely a top 5 quarterback that I saw on Sunday, but it wasn't good enough because the Patriots were awful on defense. Way too many explosive plays, way too many plays to the Rams' go-to guys. You allow Kyron Williams, Cooper Kupp, and Puka Nacua to have over 100 yards. You're not going to win. You're just not going to win. It's not going to happen. Stafford was dealing, though. Stafford had some incredible throws in the game on the sidelines, like both sidelines, throughout the game. 4 touchdowns, 142 rating. Stafford went ham, no doubt about it. But that's my thoughts, though. I didn't really feel like the Patriots, this was a game that statistically speaking, it looks like they could have won this game, but it felt like their defense just never had a handle on it. Their offense definitely deserved a chance at winning this game, and that's why they were in it. But ultimately, again, like when you have a rookie quarterback and you're asking him to beat a team like the Rams with Sean McVay, Matthew Stafford, Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua in a shootout, you're asking him to do that with Kendrick Bourne and Demario Douglas instead of Puka Nacua and Kyron Williams and Cooper Kupp. You're probably going to lose. That's just the way it is. So your defense has to play better. But that's it for me, guys. That's week number 11. Hope you guys enjoyed this review and reaction. Let me know your thoughts. It's Mitch. Deuces.